Hi everyone, it's Rich from Move Me On here. Today we're going to be talking about freelance consulting or independent consulting. I'm really happy to have Mark join me. Mark's been an independent consultant working for himself for nearly 10 years now. So Mark, with that, I'll hand over to you for a quick intro.
Hi, thanks very much for that. Pleased to meet all of you guys. As commented, I've been a freelance consultant for a long time, coming up on double digits. Been a really exciting run. I've done some really interesting projects, had some great clients, also had challenging times as well. Happy to share any of my experience with you guys.
Great. Okay, well, maybe we can use a simple kind of pros and cons structure, Mark, to kick us off. So if somebody's sort of thinking about being a freelance consultant, what do they need to be aware of? Maybe let's start with the thornier stuff. What sits on the kind of, potentially not for everyone, but possibly a con type side.
Yeah, the trickiest one is as a freelance consultant, you're not just delivering a project, you have to sell a project. So there's a sales process, you have to interview, you have to relate to clients, you have to manage that process, you have to negotiate your day rate. So you need, or I'd suggest that people kind of want a variety of skill sets. If you're just kind of happy doing the work, but you don't like the sales aspects of things, then being a freelance consultant might not be for you, because you need to interview for things, you might get rejected for projects. You kind of want, as well as an analytical ability to do work, the ability to sell yourself and get yourself into projects. So that might not be for everyone. They might just want to kind of get their head down and do the work and not have to get themselves involved with the sales process. Secondly, in terms of cons, there's an element of instability with being a freelance consultant. So you might have a project which you think is going to last 3 months, and in actual fact, circumstances change and the project lasts 1 month and you have a gap in them. Alternatively, the opposite might happen. You might have a project which has happened to me. You thought you were going to be there for 2 weeks and you're still there 9 months later on. It kind of depends on the market, on the clients, what they need. It can be quite difficult. So if you're someone who needs an element of stability, who kind of, wants to know that they are going to be able to go on a holiday for 3 weeks in September, and they're not willing to kind of drop everything because a client needs work, then maybe a freelance consultant is less appropriate to that kind of lifestyle.
Okay, so it sounds like it suits people who enjoy the end-to-end sort of pitching yourself and doing the work. You need to be able to be flexible, so expect the unexpected. Have a schedule that accommodates maybe things getting extended or things being shortened down. What about some of the big advantages you've experienced, in the past nearly 10 years?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think the thing I love about it is the excitement you get every time you start a new project. You have this idea of change and a new challenge. Of course, you might have like specialties and things that you want to do, but as a consultant, you have to have some flexibility. So you find yourselves in, potentially uncomfortable, but also exciting and challenging situations, working with new clients and new sectors, which you wouldn't necessarily have exposure to if you're in a full-time job. So you can do projects, in the past year, I've done a project in the media sector, in the shipping sector, with a sovereign wealth fund, with a large consultancy. So you can find yourself in a variety of situations, picking up, huge amounts of skills from different companies, which you wouldn't do otherwise, and you can learn different ways of doing different things. That's, the huge attraction, the variety of work that you get.
And can we talk a little bit about the financial implications? So, if somebody's sort of thinking about doing some freelance consulting work, and by the way, some people sort of just dip into it now. They'll do a project or two and then, take a permanent job. Other people like yourself tend to stick with it. What are some of the financial considerations people need to be considering?
Yeah, so in terms of setting yourself up, it's actually quite easy from a legal perspective. So you want to set yourself up with a limited company, but that's very cheap and quite easy to do. You want an accountant as well, and there's some regulatory disclosures you have to do, which your accountant can do for you. But I'd say all of that is relatively straightforward and not something that takes more than a few hours per year to do. So that shouldn't kind of like set you back. In terms of your kind of deal flow, so I'll be honest, the first 6 months, probably a year, I was a freelance consultant. I was not particularly successful because I didn't have that client base. People didn't know me in the market. I didn't get as much work as I wanted. I didn't get the day rate I wanted. That took a little bit of time. So you kind of want that buffer of money to set yourself up. Like, it may be that you have a specific client that you're going to, and that's okay. Or if you're in the market fresh, then it does take time to build the network. So you do want some element of savings before you go in there. And then secondly, from a financial perspective, even though sometimes you see these, your day rates, you're like, wow, I'm earning this much money, but there's always gaps between projects. So it's difficult to earn, if you just want to earn as much money as possible on a kind of medium to long-term basis, a permanent job is actually probably better for you because you don't have gaps between projects. From a freelancer, you can earn, good money on short-term projects, but because of the gaps, it's not necessarily something where you would, financially benefit from. I think reasons certainly that I do it is the kind of the flexibility and the change in projects, not necessarily the kind of the compensation angle.
Yeah, on the compensation angle, I think people who are considering freelance, there are some things they won't think about that you get in permanent employment, right? A pension, employer pension, maybe as an example, car allowances, but also some maybe hidden things like, sick leave, time off to do training that's actually paid for. There's quite a lot of extra elements of a full compensation package that obviously a freelancer just needs to charge a day rate and sort of cover everything. So yeah, I think that's really good guidance that, the headline day rate might look exciting and attractive, but it does lack those other elements, and you have to adjust for sort of utilization. So I guess, Mark, on like, let's say it was a good year, what percentage of working days would you expect to be sort of employed?
Yeah, I think over the past years, I've averaged about a 70% occupancy rate. And typically the projects I do last between 1 and 6 months. You do get kind of longer projects in 6 months, but then especially with legal changes, the IR35 comes into contention. So I tend to not do projects longer than 6 months. Other times, even I've had good years where I've had a higher occupancy rate. During COVID, the market declined quite substantially. So then you also have to consider, if there's an event like that again, or if there's, a recession coming up, your occupancy is going to be a little bit lower. If you have other interests which you can fill your time with, so, if you have a side hustle or you have a startup business, which you can use your dead time to work on, or some journalism or a pet project, that kind of definitely helps to fill those gaps. But yeah, just be aware that almost certainly you will have more free time than you would do normally.
Yeah, so that's 70 to 80 is sort of what people factor in for a good year. I second the startup founder. So when I started Move Me On, the platform that we run for consultants and former consultants, I freelanced on the side to sort of pay the bills, and then got back to work on the startup, and it was a really handy structure. Maybe something I wanted to close on is the evolution of perception of freelancing, and perhaps how that's become more and more legitimate. So if I cast my mind back to starting movemeon.com, there was definitely a worry around gaps in the resume, gaps in the CV. So what would you say to people who probably think they want to be in a permanent job, or in the long run? Has that changed now? I guess is freelancing more legitimate in most people's eyes?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in the past, like you said, there's a perception that freelancing was kind of, something people did in between jobs to fill some times, or, people were contractors, working for banks, or kind of on 1 or 2 year contracts. I think now freelancing is a legitimate profession. There are lots of people who've kind of done this for 2 or 3 years, or they want some more flexibility, or they want, they kind of know what they want to do, but they want to try it out a little bit first before they kind of apply for permanent positions. I think that freelancing can be seen quite positively by employees because it shows that you have, a degree of flexibility. also that you've worked in a range of organizations doing a range of projects and brought up a range of skills. So I think it's much more accepted now. I have to admit, when I first went freelance, the kind of my big worry was like, oh, I have this gap in the CV. You know, if I go back into the permanent market, how would that be seen? Well, I think now it's almost seen as an advantage that, you know, you have, as a freelancer, you have this wide range of experiences and work with a wide range of companies.
Yeah. And something I might add through experience of people using the platform and personal friends as well is quite often the spelling freelance is what leads to the next permanent job. Your network expands, as you say, you're working with a range of people in a certain business, they've all got networks. So quite naturally you start to have conversations. So I can think of a good couple of handfuls of people just who I personally know who've left a permanent job, taken up a few freelance projects, and that's actually led into, you know, the next permanent thing. Do you see that often as well, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. Both in that context of, you know, maybe you're working with a company and, you know, there's an arrangement for something more permanent works out. Also, you know, sometimes you work with colleagues, other freelancers who then move on and they kind of introduce you to people they're working for, even just networking events, which as a freelancer, you'll probably want to go to more often to kind of widen your network and meet other people. But yeah, absolutely, you're right.
Great. So I guess to try and summarize on the pro side, who does it suit? It sounds like suits somebody who likes variety. Is that right?
Yeah. In kind of my view, yeah, you need to kind of want that variety. You need to kind of be accepting to kind of instability and change. Those are the kind of persons who I think will like freelancing. People who like some element of flexibility, often, you know, compared to a full-time employee, maybe you can be more remote based or go into the office less. So maybe if you're not based in London, then freelancing is something that will suit you. I think for people who are maybe looking just for kind of financial returns, freelancing is maybe not super suited in the long term. And again, people who want kind of clarity as a freelancer, you can be put in, you know, there's a lot of times where I've gone into a job and done something completely different. In fact, probably the majority of times. So if you want some element of stability and kind of, you know, fixed job description, then freelancing might be a more difficult profession for you.
Awesome. Great summary. Look, thanks so much for the time. I think that's been really, really valuable and insightful. And, you know, I know it's a career that you've enjoyed, and it's great that it's become a more and more legitimate kind of professional choice. So thanks so much, Mark.
No, my pleasure. I mean, thanks to you guys. You guys have really opened up the market with the platform and the way you work alongside freelancers, helping with this career. You know, big fan of everything that you and you guys do.
Thank you. And everybody hasn't checked out our platform, head over to movemeon.com. It's a global platform specifically for consultants, former consultants and freelancers. Cheers, Mark.
Sure.